Hello and welcome to Computer-Aided Design for Quilters, Absolute Beginners. This is the second class and I'm going to show you today a little bit about how to start your own drawings by just showing the different types of lines that are available. To start a new pattern, we come right over here to New Pattern. I showed a different way last time, but this works also. Opens us right up into Pattern CAD, which is where we draw our designs. Last time we were here, we just edited designs that had already existed. We did not draw any new lines, but today I'm going to show you the different line types and how to use them. To start with, we need to make sure that we are either in continuous line or not. Continuous line on some computers, there's a button for it somewhere along with your other menu items. You'll see continuous line, but if you're on one of these older programs, you'll have to go into Edit and Preferences and then find the button that says continuous line. So mine was checked. I'm going to uncheck it for right now. We'll come back and do continuous line later. Also here in Preferences, you see you can change a lot of things. I have my line width set to 4 because I'm showing you, and the line width of 4 shows up much better on the screen. I have my handle size set to small, but I'm going to make that a little bit larger today so that you can see that. When the handles get too big, it's hard to edit the design, but for today we can use a large handle because I'm just going to be showing you the basics. So first off, in order to draw, we want to be here under Draw, and then we'll go to Lines. In computer-aided design, a line is a straight distance from point to point. As you can see, when I draw this, I actually end up with a bunch of little short segments, which was not my intention at all. The reason that I get all these nodes is because node spacing is on. I can tell node spacing is on because there's a 4 over here, which indicates how close together or far apart the nodes are going to be. So between each of these nodes, each of these red circles, there is a straight line. But unfortunately, when I just draw with my mouse, they end up looking like this, which isn't very pretty to me. So what I'd like to do is to turn off node spacing, and by doing that, to do that, I just hit this button right here. Now node spacing is off. I can tell it's off because there's no number over here, so I know I'm good. So now if I try to draw a line from here to here, it's really just one straight line. It goes from here to here. If I try to move this line, so let's go to Edit. If I try to move this line anywhere, the whole line moves as a straight line. I can make it shorter or longer, but it will always be a straight line. Let's go back to Draw, and I'm going to show you splines. Splines are actually my favorite kind of line so far because I like to draw curvy designs, and splines are really good at doing that. They do give you a lot of the handles. They give you 2 handles, and if you're just drawing one, it's not a big deal. But if you're drawing more than one line, it can be very confusing. When I first draw my spline, it looks exactly like my line. It's impossible on this screen to tell any difference between the two, whether it's a line or a spline, I can't tell. But when I go to Edit, this is where I can start to see the difference. So I go to Edit, and then they still look the same, as you can see. But if I select the ends, then I end up with these handles. Now there's something important I need to explain about the handles. Right now, these handles are both also selected. That means they're going to move together. So when I move one handle, I move the other handle. I can tell they're selected because they're filled in. If I want to unselect one and do this, now if I move this handle, the other handle, because it's selected, is still going to move with it. But if I move the selected handle only, the other one stays in place. This is really important when you're doing backtracking and you need to stitch back over a line you've sewn before. Learning how to use these handles as selected or unselected is super important. I'm going to unselect this one because I like to just be able to show you the variations that we can do with a line like this. It can all come the same direction. It can go different directions. We can decide to change it up like this. The splines are really versatile and you can get them to match just about any curve that you'd like. But as you start getting more and more handles in your drawing, it can be a little confusing. So let's go back to draw and look at the next type of line. The next type is an arc. Arcs, like the other two, when you first draw them, look just like a line. And the only way to tell what you've got is to come up here to edit, to select the two ends, and then you get a handle. So the arc has one box, and that box can either be selected or unselected. Here we go to select it. It doesn't make a difference on this particular line whether the handle is selected or unselected. This line's going to move the same. The difference will be if this box, this handle is selected, and there's other stuff selected that we want to move, then that selected handle is also going to move. So if I try to adjust my spline while the arc has its handle selected, then both lines move. This is one of the reasons I feel like that unselect all button is so important, because if we hit unselect all, we don't have to worry about some node or handle that's not on the screen moving while we're not looking. So if we start from unselect all, then we can go ahead and adjust exactly what we want to adjust. So if I select both ends with the same box like this, then the handle is going to show up as selected, filled in. And then I can either use it that way or I can individually unselect it. When we're editing, we can see these handles only when both ends of the segment are selected. If we hit select all, you can now see the difference between the lines. This one is a bunch of nodes connecting short straight lines. This is our long line that we did without any nodes. This is the spline, which has two handles that we can use to adjust it. And this is our arc that has one handle. The next thing we're going to go to is the parabola. So there's parabola. We start at one end, go to the other end, and like most of these segments, it looks exactly the same. This segment, if we select both ends, oops, that's not exactly what I wanted. I need to change to edit first. So in edit, if I select both ends, then I get one handle in the middle. This handle's a little different than the arc handle, and there's really no way to tell until you start moving it around. But when you pull it straight like this, you get a slightly different shape than the arc. But this one you can move from side to side. So it could be convenient for something you're drawing. I personally haven't found a need for it yet, but I haven't done this very long, so maybe there'll come a time when I find that it's useful. All right, so now we've seen all of these lines. If we select all, you can see two handles, one handle and one handle that's movable from side to side to make each of these shapes. Let's go a little bit further though. How would this sew out these separate segments? If we hit optimize, we can see what the design is planning to do now. It will go from start to finish, to start to finish, to start to finish, and on and on. But if we were to really want to sew this out for some reason, we'd more than likely want to have these connecting lines be in a different place, probably shorter if at all possible. So how do we do that? Well, right now, these lines are labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So our order is great. But let's say I want this to be the start instead of that. If I want to start here, then I come over to the lower left-hand corner, and it shows these yellow circles, which are the, let's see, I had a name that I was going to call them, stitching order. That's it. So this is the stitching order button. Right now it says show stitching order. If I take it off, it doesn't show the stitching order. But if I click on that, I get stitching order, and then it starts with number 1. I want this now to be 1. So if this is 1, now it naturally goes up to 2, 3, 4, and down to the bottom. But I'm not really happy with that stitching order either. I can start to move these things around. You'll notice down here in the corner that once I assigned 1 to one of the lines, this skipped up to number 2. And so the next thing I click on will be the second thing that I stitch. So let's make it this. Then we have 3, 4, 5, just kind of, that's how it naturally worked out. We might have had to renumber all of those, but as you can see, this skipped from 2 to 3 when I hit, when I assigned 2 to this stitch order button. So now I'm sewing from bottom to top. I said I wanted to start over here though, and right now this is a red button, which means that the stitching ends here. It starts here and goes here, and we can see that with animate stitching, but I'm going to hold off for a minute before I animate the stitching. So we want to change the direction of this, and the best way to do that is just to highlight the line so it goes from a black line to a black line outlined in yellow, and then click it, and then the direction that that line stitches changes. So now we're starting here, going around up to 2, back this way, but now we have another problem. I'm still reaching all the way across before I stitch 3. One of the things I could do would be to remove this trim line and let it stitch all the way across. But that doesn't look very good, and there's a glitch in this particular part of the Pattern CAD software which changed where this end went when I hit that. So I don't really like that choice. So we're gonna just undo it. What I'd like then is for 3 to stitch from this direction to that direction so that my design goes up and looks neat and tidy. All I have to do is highlight that line, click on it, and the direction of stitching changes. Then of course this one already matches because 4 already started over here and goes to here. And now I want to change the direction of 5. All right, so now I have a nice design that starts at 1, goes to 2, 3, 4, 5, but these are all still line breaks. In other words, the machine is going to sew from this green button to this red button, break the thread, then come up to here and start and sew this cut the thread, and then start here. But what I'd like it to do is sew one complete design. That's usually what we do when we're making quilting designs anyway. I mean, that's kind of the goal, is to get a continuous line if you can. So what do? Well, I'm going to show you what actually works, but unfortunately it doesn't work in Pattern CAD. We're going to have to change and move the machine, but I'll show you first why it doesn't work, and then we'll go to Pattern CAD and do it, or excuse me, go to Quilt CAD and do it the right way. You're going to move your patterns from Pattern CAD to Quilt CAD anyway, so it's not a horrible step. So one of the easy ways to get rid of all these trim lines and have the machine sew through those lines is just to hit this remove all. It asks if you want to connect the first and last points. That would be this point, the first point of the design, to that point, the last point of the design. And obviously I don't want that, so I'm going to say no. Now though, you see this looks horrible. It's not what we had before. Something is terribly wrong. So we hit return. Another way to do this is to simply delete each of these nodes by hitting the blue dot until it gets a red circle and then clicking. But unfortunately, in Pattern CAD, when we do this, it messes up our design. So we aren't going to be able to do that either. And there's one final way of using the optimized software to eliminate your trim lines, and that is to use the animate stitching and check for breaks. Here on the bottom you see animate stitching button and check for breaks. We need this one checked, and then if we hit animate stitching, it'll ask us each time it gets to a break if we want to remove it. And here we say yes, and yes, and yes, and yes. We don't want to connect that first and last point, so we say no, but unfortunately it's still a mess. Like I said, we don't have to worry. We can reset. We're back. Well, maybe I didn't want to go quite that far. So I'm going to undo, and now we're back to where we were. With everything connected kind of the way we want, the stitching order in the way we want, all we have to do is save this pattern, which is what we wanted to do anyway. So we, sorry about that. We're in Optimize. We go to OK down here in the lower right-hand corner to close this out and get us back to Pattern CAD. And then we save our design from here. To save your design, just go onto the upper left-hand corner under File, Save Pattern. You can choose where you want to save it, but for me, the continuous line designs seem to save just fine here, and then I can find them all again. I tend to call mine test. As you can see, I already had a test file there, but we're going to save this one over it. And we'll overwrite, yes. Now, I'm going to close this out and end up in Quilt CAD. To do that, all I have to do is go to my lower right-hand corner where it says Quilt. I don't need to save my current pattern because I already did. And then I come up here to Optimize. And it brings up my design. So remember, there are 3 ways to go through these trim lines and remove them. One is just to physically remove the ones I want to get rid of by hand. One is to use this remove all button, remove all trim line button down here, and then they'll all go at the same time. I don't want to connect the first and last points. And then finally, let me undo that so we can show you again. The last way is to go to animate stitching. Oops. Let's try again. Check for breaks and animate stitching. And then it'll ask me each time if I want to remove the breaks. And no, I don't want to connect those last two. So as you can see now, when we use Quilt CAD instead of Pattern CAD to do that final optimization and removal of the trim lines, we get exactly what we were looking for. I hope this is helpful and that you are able to get some designs of your own going on Pattern CAD based on this. If you like my video, please hit like. You can leave a comment if you'd like to and share it. Special thanks out to T. Soar, who left me a message about that select and unselect all button, which somehow in the couple of weeks I've been using this program I never noticed before.